Right. Hi, everybody, and thanks for joining us at our afternoon session of the agency submittal workshop. This is the second of two pretty identical in content we're off today for our agencies that are considering projects at FY 2026 call for projects. I'm Ali Blazowski, and the Transportation Planning Program Manager at the Alamo Area MPO. I did start a recording of the presentation so that we'll have this available on the Call for Projects webpage following the afternoon. So I actually wanted to say that giving the bulk of today's information will be my colleague at the MPO, Clifton Hall. He's our regional transportation planner, as well as our colleague over at TxDOT, John Jameson. And John directs TxDOT's local governments project section. So we're really happy to have you both. We do welcome questions, and we're a friendly group, so feel free to speak up if you have a clarifying question during one of the presentations. Also, feel free to use the chat box, and one of us will either voice that or answer in the chat so that we can get everybody's questions answered. We also have saved some time at the end of the workshop for a Q&A. Let's see. The goal for you all today, I hope, is to come away with an understanding of what the call for projects is about, what is considered an eligible project, and the priorities that the MPO is looking for, as well as to get a good understanding of, if your project is selected, what the local government program responsibilities will be for that. And we will definitely have the resources, these presentations, up on that project call webpage later this afternoon, so that you'll be able to reference them again, as well as access some of the links. John definitely has some great links in his presentation slides too that you'll be able to access. Well, I'm going to get us moving into the MPO overview, and then Clifton will take us to the TIP project call information, followed by John's presentation for the LG local government program requirements. And we'll end up with a walkthrough of our submittal form, followed by Q&A. Okay. So as many of you are probably familiar with, the Alamo Area MPO is a federally mandated agency, and we ensure that local governments are working together with the public, as well as the state, local, and federal partners to collaborate on transportation issues that our region faces. And the MPO works with all of these partners to develop transportation plans, select and approve projects that will receive federal funding, and administer programs that should improve mobility options and performance. So every MPO in the nation has a responsibility for developing 3 planning documents for their regions. One is a 2-year planning work program, and it is our UPWP. I apologize, it got down there at the bottom of this list, but the UPWP outlines the staff budget and the regionally significant planning studies that will be occurring in that region over the next couple of years. Next is a transportation improvement program, which is our short-range transportation plan that outlines projects that are going to be going to construction in a next 4 to 5 year period. And then the other third document that every MPO puts together is its MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan. This is a long-range plan. It considers the community's vision for the future, especially for transportation. And it outlines all the projects that would be expected to receive federal funding or approval by our federal partners over the next 25 years. Now, that fourth document that is down there is the Transportation Conformity Document, and it's a relatively recent responsibility for our MPO, particularly because one of the counties in our area is working through an air quality non-attainment designation. So we are at the MPO responsible for putting together that transportation conformity document. Now, in the Alamo area, we have about 2 million residents who are moving around 51 million miles every day. All this movement is happening over a 3.5 county area, and this is expected to actually double in the next 25 years. So we don't expect that we'd actually be able to double the amount of roadway we have. So that means that our transportation options and technology will have to help us move about twice the people, twice as far, but not necessarily on twice the amount of lanes. It's the Transportation Policy Board that guides regional transportation policy for the MPO. And it is informed by the committees that you see here, as well as the staff that works for the MPO. And the local officials who make up the policy board represent counties and cities and agencies from across the study area. So our current chair is Commissioner Webb from Comal County, and our current chair-elect is Councilwoman Melissa Cabello-Haberdet. She's from the city of San Antonio. And the board ultimately selects projects for funding during a call such as this. An initial funding recommendation is made by that MPO TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, up to the Executive Committee. And the Executive Committee will then forward a funding recommendation to the Transportation Policy Board for consideration. Now, at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can pass it over to Clifton, and he will dig into all the particulars of the funding sources and call procedures that you are here to hear about. Okay, Clifton, I'm about to get you the presentation roll.
All right, thanks, Allie.
You're welcome. There you go, and I can see your content.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, like Allie said, I'm Clifton Hall, the Regional Transportation Planner here at AAMPO, and just want to say if anybody has any questions or comments or anything, don't feel afraid to interrupt me or raise your hand or anything. I'll have to answer your questions as we go through, and of course we'll have time at the end for questions. So to kind of get started, like Ali said, I'm going to talk about kind of the bulk of the information specific to this project call. And a lot of, I'd say most of this is the same to previous project calls that we've done here at AAMPO, but there are a few new particularities. The main one being we have 3 funding sources this time. Traditionally, we've only funded one project call, or one funding source per project call, and this time we are funding 3, namely STBG, CMAQ, and TAP funding. And so I just wanted to start with explaining what those 3 are. STBG is the Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. Like all these programs, it's a federally reimbursable funding program. And as far as MPO controlled funds go, this is our most flexible funding source. And it is available for all project and program types. Our 4 project types for this project call will be capacity, operational, bicycle and pedestrian, and transit projects. And for STBG and for the whole project call, really, projects will be scored using a multi-factor performance-based set of criteria. And for this project call, STBG is our largest available funding pool. Moving on to CMAQ. CMAQ stands for Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program. Again, federally reimbursable. And CMAQ supports transportation projects that generate emissions reductions. As Ali mentioned, one of the counties in our MPO study area is non-attainment, and that's Bexar County. And that area, that county specifically doesn't meet NAAQS, or National Air Quality Standards, for ozone. Actually, for us, it's nitrous oxide, NOx, and VOCs, or volatile organic compounds. So those are the 2 exceedances that we have. We go over the nationally set limits for those 2 air quality pollutants. And so really these projects, this program nationally is designed to lower those emissions. And so we're going to look specifically at those emissions reductions as a part of project strategies whenever we consider CMAQ projects to be funded. And our last funding category is TAP, TA, whatever you want to call it. It stands for Transportation Alternatives Program. And here at Alamo Area MPO, we fund specifically bicycle and pedestrian projects with this funding category. It's technically a sub-allocation or set-aside of authorized STBG funds, but it has a more specific set of missions it's supposed to be on. So ours is bicycle and pedestrian. And with AAMPO and our partners, we've developed these criteria for all project types, but we focused on bike and ped specifically for TA projects, even though they are also eligible for our regular STBG funds as well as CMAQ if they meet the other requirements. So eligible entities, applicants can include municipalities, counties, metropolitan transit authorities, regional mobility authorities, river authorities, and school districts within our study area. But as far as CMAQ funding goes, again, only agencies within Bexar County are eligible for those funds since it's our only non-attainment county in the study area. Funding availability is allocated by formula, and it's based on population for STBG and TAP. But for CMAQ, it also includes a formula based on severity of air quality exceedance. This funding is contingent upon the availability of federal funding, and we're estimating a total amount of funds available between the three programs to be $320 million for fiscal years 2022 through 2028. And as you can see, for CMAQ, we have approximately $21 to $22 million available for, looks like 6 years. For STBG, we have 4 years of approximately, or 3 years of approximately $50 million, with some additional leftover from our previous project call for STBG at $15 million. And then for transportation alternatives, we get approximately $3 million a year. So that's how we get to that $320.5 million total. So getting into what projects are eligible for each funding source, again, STBG is the most flexible. And for construction projects, infrastructure projects in general, only the construction elements are eligible for funding and not the preliminary phases. So we can't fund right-of-way or engineering for construction infrastructure projects. But eligible projects do include roadway widenings and new construction or capacity projects. For operational, which would include signal retiming, intersection improvements, and ITS. We can fund transit improvements through STBG, as well as bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And then programs such as freight and intermodal improvement programs, van pools, et cetera. Those are all eligible through STBG. And that's not a comprehensive list, just some examples. For CMAQ, the requirements are more strict. Again, if it's an infrastructure project, only the construction element can be funded, but projects that add or reduce roadway capacity are not eligible for CMAQ funding. So again, we're left with operational projects, congestion reduction and traffic flow improvements, freight and intermodal improvements, such as engine retrofits and replacements, intermodal facilities and grade separations, and as well as transit and bike and pedestrian improvements in those facilities as well. So CMAQ also has it has a lot broader scope of eligible programs that it's eligible for, and these all focus on air quality. So it's a long list, but it includes things like diesel retrofits for transit vehicles, parking programs, travel demand management, as well as like education and training, and then alternative fuels and vehicles. One thing to note, though, is that planning studies are not eligible for CMAQ funding, only implemented programs. And here's a guide with more information. These two websites are interim guidance from FHWA, and this presentation will be available on our website following today. So you should be able to see that tomorrow and click through these links if you would like. You don't have to write them down or anything. But these two websites provide additional information on the CMAQ program. And finally, for TAP eligible projects, again, if it's an infrastructure project, only the construction elements are eligible. That rule still applies across the entire project call. Capital projects are fundable through TAP, including new and improved bike and multi-use paths, sidewalks, et cetera. Operational projects such as crossing and safety improvements, safe routes to school, and road diets would also be eligible under operational. And then transit improvements such as bike storage facilities, connectivity improvements, et cetera. And then, of course, programs involving bike and pedestrian education and such. So overall requirements, this is a competitive project call, so we will be scoring projects and selecting them based on those scores. It is a reimbursement program, again, which means that all federal and state rules apply for reimbursable programs, including the requirement to make an agreement with TxDOT and accept pass-through funding through TxDOT. Attendance at this workshop is required for all entities, so there you go. You guys are already one step ahead of the game. And then a minimum $1 million construction cost for infrastructure projects does apply. And then all project development costs, such as design, engineering, utility relocation, and right-of-way acquisition, are the responsibility of the implementing agency. And there is no minimum cost for programs, unlike the construction type projects that we'll receive. So another big requirement is that all proposals require a minimum 20% cash match, and that's cash available on hand, not in-kind matches or anything like that. And we'll have additional technical points being awarded for cash matches that are greater than 20%, and then additional points for cash matches greater than 30%. Entities awarded funding will enter into an agreement with TxDOT, and TxDOT will require reimbursement of their costs for review and coordination of the project and program. And John Jameson's going to share more of the local government program at TxDOT later, so some of your questions there will be answered probably. Implementing entities must sign the project and program understanding form. That's part of your supporting documents for the proposal. Entities submitting multiple proposals must assign an overall priority value to each proposal. Selected projects and programs will be allocated funding in years 2023 through 2026, and potentially 2027 and 2028. And those will go directly into the MPO short and long-range plans. And finally, implementing entities commit to developing and letting selected projects in the year funding is allocated. So I'm just going to go quickly through our schedule for the call for projects that kind of nest within our 2023 through 2026 tip development. So the project call began in earnest on October 1st, and today we're having our workshop providing information and supporting info of 2 submitting agencies. And then in October through March of this year, through March of next year, agencies will develop projects and secure their local match. But on April 1st of this year, project submittals and commitment of local match are due to the MPO. And then in June of this year, we'll begin public meetings and online public input for the projects that are submitted. And then in August, TPB will select and approve SCBG, TA, and CMAQ projects. So after they're selected and approved by TPB in September of this year through next February, travel demand modeling and emissions analysis will be conducted. And then the following March, public meetings will be held on transportation conformity. And then in April and May, we'll have presentation and action, respectively, on all 3 documents, the MTP tip and the conformity document. And then the following June, and that'll be June, July, and August of next year, we'll have interagency consultation review with our federal and state partners. And in September of next year, we'll have our conformity determination from FHW and FTA. And then the month after that, in October 2022, is our goal for having the 2023 through 2026 tip in effect. Okay, moving on to the proposal scoring criteria. So we do have a multi-agency work group under our TAC that is evaluating proposed emissions and assumptions and technically scoring the proposals. So we're going to use a 1,000-point scale, and we've already developed mostly those criteria. And some projects and programs might not be able to be technically scored, but those will still be evaluated, rated, and possibly recommended by the working group. Programs will be scored identically to projects to the fullest extent possible. And then we will have bonus points for overmatching. That is that going above 20% of your local match. And then for transportation equity criteria that we're working on. So unlike previous project calls, again, we're funding 3 MPO funding categories at once, and it'll be programmed in a single call. So along with that, projects will be scored based on project type, not funding category. So basically we'll have 2 sets of scoring. STBG and TA will be scored the same, but you'll be scored based on project type, if that makes sense. All projects will automatically be considered for all eligible sources. And CMAQ will require separate documentation, but as I'll show you later, you only have to submit one form per project, basically. So the CMAQ documentation will be included. And projects will be recommended for funding based on technical score, agency priority, and public input, as well as project readiness. So going over these scoring criteria, these percentages won't change. The Transportation Policy Board has already approved the scoring criteria percentages, so you can expect these not to change, but the methodology is still draft and it's still in the works. So looking at capacity type projects, the first criteria is improving safety, which is 35% of the total score. Improving system connectivity and supporting a regional multimodal network is 10%. Addressing travel demand is 10%. Improving congestion delay is 10%. And then improving overall reliability and freight reliability are 10% each. So for our operational type projects, or TISMO projects as we like to call them, the first criteria is improving safety. And for both the same capacity, that means addressing a high crash rate facility. So that's 30% of points. Again, addressing travel demand is having a high volume to capacity ratio, and that's 20% for TISMO. Improving system connectivity is 15%, congestion delay is 15%, and then overall reliability and freight reliability are each 10%. For transit, everything changes obviously, so increasing ridership is the primary scoring criteria, and it's 25% of available points. Improving reliability in terms of on-time performance is 20%. Improving system connectivity by enhancing existing network connections and or making new connections is 15%. Increasing service capacity is 15%. Addressing equitable access, which is based on environmental justice and other equity factors, is 15%. And increasing frequent transit access based on proximity to VIA or other partner agency routes is 10%. And for bike ped, again, these are different since they're not roadway, but improving safety, again, is the highest concern we have, and that's 35% of the score. And that is specifically for bike ped scoring is high non-motorized crash rates. And then serving high activity generators is second at 20%. That includes school, employment, population, and so forth. Improving system connectivity is 20%. Again, addressing equitable access is 15% for this project type. And then overall usage and demand, based on the best available usage data that we have, is 10%. So CMAQ scoring criteria. This is a little bit more straightforward. So in the past, we included some planning factor similar to previous, the other project types were included in the project call. But since we're doing a combined call, we decided it would be more straightforward and easy to just look at the emission reduction value. So we'll be using Texas Transportation Institute's Moser's tool. And you'll look at your project type and look at the applicable strategy found in the tool. Say you're doing a signal retiming. You'll click through a worksheet that will, you'll enter pertinent information and it will give you a number in pounds per day of your emissions reduction for each VOC and NOx. And so you can kind of see a calculation at the bottom there. If the calculator, it wouldn't say kilograms in this tool, but say, for example, one of our projects from our previous call reduced 4.01 kilograms of NOx per day. And if you multiply that by the days in the year and the number of kilograms in a short ton, that was, and then also $8,600 for a short ton of NOx, which is the US DOT value per short ton of NOx reduced. That project reduced $16,000 a year worth of emissions, basically. And so we'll take that number, and then that will be 50% of the points. So basically, the project which reduces the most will receive 500 points, and then the others will scale based on their values compared to that highest project. And then for the emissions reduction benefit cost ratio, that will compare the project cost to the emissions reduction value probably over the lifetime of the project. Again, we're still working out the methodology, but it's basically just, if a project is smaller and doesn't produce quite as, as much benefit, it will still get a high number of points if it's cost effective, basically. So again, that methodology is still in the works, but we're going with this 50-50, peer value versus benefit cost ratio calculation for scoring CMAQ projects. And again, CMAQ projects, as long as they meet the CMAQ requirements, STBG and TAP. If they meet the requirements for the other programs, they'll be eligible for those programs too. So again, we'll use TTI as Moser's emissions calculation tool. And in some cases, for some strategies, for some emissions reduction strategies, Moser's might not have an applicable strategy coded into the tool. So in the past, we've used the Federal Highway Administration CMAQ emissions calculator toolkit. So if the strategy is not available in Moser's, we will default to using that instead. And if you have any questions about that as you're applying, you can contact us. But some example strategies are transit bus and fleet expansion, retrofits and replacements, carpooling and van pooling, alternative fuels or advanced diesel technology, congestion reduction and traffic flow improvements, idle reduction, bike and ped improvements, and new park and ride locations. And again, not an exhaustive list, but that's a pretty good example of what kind of projects fall under those emissions reduction strategy. And if emissions reductions cannot be calculated using either of the above tools, the submitting agency will have to estimate emissions reductions using their own methodology, and all assumptions and calculations must also be submitted. And I would recommend that you contact us if you're in that boat and you can't find an applicable calculator or tool to use to do that for you, and we'll help you out as much as we can with that. So I've reached the point of the presentation where I will demo our project submission form, but before we do that, we have it on the agenda for John Jameson to present his local government presentation to give you more information on what that process working through TxDOT will be like.
Thanks, Clifton. And John, I'm going to make you the presenter.
All righty, thank you.
I don't think that we'll be in the same boat or actually be the wrong John. You are the only,
Okay.
only John on this afternoon.
All right, let me get this situated here. There we go.
And that looks
All right.
good.
Okay, thank you, Allie.
The one slide.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Jameson, and I'm the director of the Local Government Projects section at TxDOT. And I know the majority of this presentation is focused in on the application for projects and what goes into that. But we did want to give you an overview of the program requirements if your project is selected, and just give you a little bit of information and then available resources related to your project and the program at TxDOT. So this is how we define a local government project. It's at least one phase of the project development, and that includes environmental design, right-of-way, utility relocation, and construction, or the whole program is managed by a local government agency for which is being reimbursed with federal and or state funding. The second part of the definition is where the project is totally locally funded and managed by the local government, but it's on the state highway system. I don't think that's going to apply under these program calls because there's going to be federal funding related to these projects. So I think the first part of this definition is going to apply to your projects. Texas has a very active local government program. As of this month, we have about 700 active local government projects across the state. We work with more than 200 local governments, and this includes cities, counties, regional toll authorities, the RMAs, and the planning organizations. 21 of the TxDOT districts have active local government projects. And the funding varies from year to year, but we often see nearly $1 billion in total project costs related to local government projects. We have a wide variety of projects that are funded under this program: the Transportation Alternatives, Surface Transportation Program, Congestion Mitigation, Air Quality projects, Safe Routes to School. We do a lot of traffic signalization. We have pass-through financing, and all those are typically federally participating. We also have other projects, the Border Colonias and the county energy sector roads, which are state funded only. There are not federal funds involved in those programs. One thing to keep in mind, when you have a project with TxDOT, you're going to have various laws and regulations that are applicable. Some of those laws are on the federal level. The majority of our regulations are codified in 23 CFR, which covers the highway. 49 CFR covers transportation, and that portion of the federal code is where the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise program is housed and is applicable when there's federal funding on your project. We also have to follow state regulations. So the Texas Administrative Code is applicable. That applies to transportation. That's Title 43. And then, of course, you also have to be in compliance with the local government code, whether you're a municipal government or a county government. So the general rule that we have there is that you have to comply with all the regulations, and the regulation that is most stringent related to that specific topic is what you have to comply with. Some key federal funding principles that you need to be aware of and follow if your project is selected. The first item there, federal aid funds shall not participate in any cost that is not incurred in conformity with applicable federal and state law. My experience with FHWA is that if you show good faith effort in conforming and applying the federal and state laws to your project, then the project will be eligible for reimbursement. I think that they have a very common sense approach to this aspect of the federal code. The second item there, federal funds shall not be paid on account of any costs incurred prior to authorization by the administrator. So on these local government projects, TxDOT is the administrator. You are going to receive your authorization to move into the next phase of the project from TxDOT. And very specifically, that authorization is going to come from your project manager at the district. That's going to either be an email or what we call a state letter of authority telling you that you are authorized to start work into the next phase. So that's important documentation, and that's required from the federal code. The third bullet there, the State Highway Department may utilize under its supervision the services of well-qualified and suitably equipped engineering organizations. So TxDOT enters into contracts with consultants all the time. Under this program, the local governments are considered engineering organizations, or can be considered engineering organizations, and their consultants under contract with the local government can be considered engineering organizations. The key phrase there, or one of the key phrases there is that TxDOT, under its supervision, has to remain actively involved and provide oversight on these projects. And that gets us to the last bullet there. The State Highway Department is not relieved of its responsibilities under federal law and the regulations in the event it utilizes the service of an engineering organization. So this is why we provide oversight on local government projects. You may be involved in other grant programs where the federal entity provides the funding to you, and they say, go do it, and then you do a closeout. This is not the case when there's federal aid highway funding involved in your project. So what we're talking about here is that you're going to submit your proposals and projects to the MPO. They're going to go through a selection process that Clifton just outlined. And then if your project is selected, you're going to enter into an agreement with TxDOT. The funding for these projects comes from USDOT. It moves to Federal Highway and then to TxDOT and then to the local government. Clifton mentioned earlier that these are reimbursement projects. They are. You're going to incur your costs, and that's either for a consultant or for a construction contractor. You're going to submit a reimbursement request to TxDOT. We're going to review it and make sure it's appropriate. Once we feel it's appropriate and signed off on it, we'll start the process to reimburse you for the federal or state portion of that project. At that point, TxDOT is going to request from FHWA that they pay us for the federal portion of the project. So just keep in mind, you're paying for these projects up front, and then you're seeking reimbursement from TxDOT. As part of the federal code, we're required to look and make sure that we minimize any kind of risk on these projects. So we go through a risk assessment process. And basically what we consider is the local government's previous experience in doing the proposed type of work, the local government capability to perform the work, the timing of the work. Do we need it quickly? Can the local government do it quicker than TxDOT? The district engineer is also looking at resources within their district on local government projects and state-led projects. So that's a consideration there. And then a cost effectiveness of all of the available options on how to develop and then deliver that project. So there's documentation and guidance documents available to local governments on the risk assessment process. You can see the link there at the bottom of this slide. That's where that information is. There's a local government risk assessment and participation responsibilities in the advanced funding agreement. There's a document on the web page there. The risk assessment process basically is two items. One, the district is going to look at the local government and do a risk assessment internally. And then the second item is based on the oversight level special approval, and that's required by state administrative code. The district is going to provide to the local government Part A of this special approval form. You, as the local government, are going to fill that out, and you're going to define what phases of the project you are going to do and what phases potentially TxDOT is going to do. Most of these projects, you will probably do the majority of the phases, including the construction phase, but that's going to be discussed during this risk assessment process and when you're negotiating the advanced funding agreement. You'll complete Part A, you'll provide that to TxDOT. TxDOT will fill out Part B, and then that helps TxDOT determine the oversight level and the frequency of oversight that we need to do on this specific project. These will be updated as needed. Typically, they're either done on a 1 or a 2-year cycle to make sure that we're providing the appropriate oversight level. Again, there's the link to the risk assessment webpage on txdot.gov. So Clifton mentioned that on MPO selected projects, you will enter into a contract with TxDOT. These are known as advanced funding agreements. On most projects, the local government will be responsible for paying TxDOT's costs to oversee the project. The estimated cost for this oversight is going to be outlined and included in the budget page of the advanced funding agreement. One thing I want to stress here is this is just an estimate. We're estimating this based on, previous projects, the history of the local government, the knowledge that the district staff has about the cost that it takes to oversee these projects. At the end of the project, we will settle up with the local government on these oversight costs, and we will either request that you pay us additional money for our oversight costs, or if we haven't used all the money that was outlined in the advanced funding agreement for this item, then we will cut a check back to the local government. I bring this up because I don't want this to be a surprise to any local government that one, you're paying us for our oversight costs, and two, at the end of the project, you may have to settle up with TxDOT if the estimate was short of what the actual costs were. The AFA will also have typical contract clauses. It's going to have a financial commitment. It's going to talk about who is going to do the right-of-way and utilities, any kind of environmental assessment, the use of professional services, the design criteria, construction responsibilities, and then if it's a non-construction project, then those items will be addressed there also. It's also going to require that you apply and conform with the applicable federal provisions. This is the main one is FHWA 1273. There are civil rights compliance requirements. There's the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, the debarment, and then the anti-lobbying certifications. There are also some state requirements that you have to comply with. The child support documentation, that's a state requirement, and then the TDLR on any pedestrian facility. So let's talk a little bit about the project management structure on local government projects. So prior to beginning work, both the local government and TxDOT will designate in writing a responsible person in charge who is accountable for the project. The LG's RPIC must be a full-time employee of that local government. So it cannot be a consultant, and it has to be a full-time employee of the local government. TxDOT's RPIC must be a full-time employee of TxDOT who is also a registered professional engineer. So these are public works projects, they're engineering projects, and so the federal code requires that since we're providing oversight, our RPIC has to be a registered professional engineer. So the RPIC is kind of the high-level person. They're not managing the project, but they need to be familiar with the day-to-day project operations. They're probably involved in any kind of financial decision, any kind of change orders, any kind of changes to the advanced funding agreement. We often see where the RPIC is the public works director or the city engineer or the county engineer. So again, it's kind of the high level person, not necessarily running the project. The next person that we define in this program is that both TxDOT and the local government will designate a project manager. So these are the people that are talking on a regular basis, providing daily oversight on the project. They're the primary point of communication about the project between the local government and TxDOT. It can be the same person as the RPIC, and the project manager may be a consultant. So often we see where the RPIC is obviously somebody with the local government, but the project manager is a consultant. That's a decision that you as the local government will make and discuss with TxDOT during the risk assessment phase and as you're negotiating the advanced funding agreement. The last position that's required by the local government is to have a qualified person, and that is somebody that has taken our local government LGP 101 class. It may be the same person as the RPIC or the project manager. And this position can also be either an agency employee or a consultant. Several years ago, we started requiring that this qualification has to be renewed every 3 years. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So some of the program specifics, and this you need to keep in mind when you're looking at your projects and putting your applications together. Based on where your project is located, whether it's on the system or off the state highway system, you may be required to adopt TxDOT's procedures, standards, and specifications. There are certain instances where you will be able to submit alternative specifications for TxDOT approval, and that would be done during the PS&E development. Let me give you an example of that. If your project is off system, you do not necessarily have to use our specifications. You may have a specification that meets the requirement for the program. But if it is on system, you're going to have to use our specifications if we have a specification for that item of work. Various resources that are available to you. The first one is the project scoping guidebook. This is a document that we worked with to have developed. It provides local governments information on scoping your project, estimating your costs, the timeline for transportation projects. So this is a good resource that's available out there, and you can see online. It's available at this link right here. You just download it, and it's available to you. Some additional resources. So FHWA has what they call the federal aids essential for local public agencies, and that's what FHWA calls these projects is LPAs. This is a website, and you can see the link right there. There's about 70 videos that cover a wide range of program issues. It includes environmental videos, it includes civil rights issues, it includes the DBE program. It talks about procurement of professional services. It talks about a procurement of construction contracts and things like that. So again, this is a resource. Most of the videos are between 7 and 10 minutes. They give you a good overview of that specific item. TxDOT resources. We have our local government project section website. If you have ever signed up for our LGP 101, you've been to this website. It has various information. It has links to processes and procedures. It has a link to our toolkit. You can see the link right there. It also has other program information and other links to other parts of the other aspects of the program, including the DB program and civil rights requirements. Another resource that's available to you on TxDOT.gov is we have developed standard specifications and special provisions specific to local government projects, and these are often referred to as items 1 through 9L. Those are available on TxDOT's website. There's the link. If you use these items 1 through 9L, these cover the contract administration requirements, and they meet the federal requirements that you will have to comply with under the local government program. Often local governments have their own general specifications or general requirements that they developed on their public works projects. We encourage you to use these items 1 through 9L on these local government projects that are funded through FHWA because they do meet the federal requirements. One thing that you should definitely avoid is having these special provisions in the standard specifications in your proposal documents and your regular public works provisions. Often, or there can be a conflict between your provisions and TxDOT provisions, and you don't want a conflict in your proposal document. So again, we encourage you to use these documents. There is some leeway for you to adjust and modify these standard specifications and special provisions. So that's something that you would discuss with the TxDOT district during the PS&E development. We also have developed as a resource the LGP toolkit. These are 3 documents. The policy manual covers the federal and state laws, basically why we have to do things a certain way under this program. The project management guide, what are the procedures that you have to go through, and then the project workbook. And the workbook describes best practices, and it also includes numerous frequently used documents that local governments can use under this program if they don't have similar forms and documents that they use. So this is a great resource. The toolkit links to all 3 documents, and it also links to other resources within TxDOT and other resources that are available on the federal level. I mentioned earlier about our LGP 101 training. This is a 12-hour class, and at the end of the class, you have to pass an exam in order to be certified. We teach this in coordination with UT Arlington. Since the pandemic, we've moved this class to a virtual platform, and we teach this class 2 to 3 times per month. If you go to our website that's shown at the bottom of this slide, it has the training schedule. It also has the form that you would submit to Workforce Development at TxDOT in order to get registered for the class. I also will say that almost every class that we have is full. You don't need to sign up for a class right now. Probably the timing that I would recommend is if your project was selected and you've been contacted that your project is selected and is going to move forward, then at that time I would start thinking about getting signed up for the LGP 101 class. All the resources and tools that we've developed and the training that we provide are organized to align with the phases of the project development. That begins with project initiation. So we consider that really before an advanced funding agreement is executed. And that once that AFA is executed, then you're going to enter into the preliminary engineering phase, PS&E development, and that's going to include any kind of environmental work that needs to be done, any kind of right-of-way and utilities. And then ultimately, out of the PS&E development, you'll develop a proposal for your construction project. And then the letting and award phase, and then the construction phase, and then project closeout. We have these various resources at TxDOT and at FHWA, but the best resource that you have is your contact at the district. They are going to monitor your project. They're going to oversee your project. So your project manager is going to be at the district level. San Antonio has a very experienced and very knowledgeable staff there that are very familiar with local government projects. So they're going to be a great resource for you during the project, during your project. My section, we will provide guidance to you and to the districts. We provide advice and support to the districts. We provide the training. We do some monitoring of project activities under this program, and we meet regularly with FHWA concerning the program. We also have great resources at the division level. They provide technical resources and provide subject matter experts. So if we need to go to the bridge division, we can. If we need to go to the construction division or to the traffic division, those are all resources that we can use to make sure that we address any kind of issues that come up on a project. And let me just say, there are going to be issues that come up during your project. And what we want to do is to provide guidance to you, provide answers to you, so you can develop and deliver a successful project. The San Antonio District webpage is right there on txdot.gov. My information, my phone number is right there. My coordinator for San Antonio District is Sonia Ayers. Her phone number is there. You're more than welcome to call us, but I think really the best resources would be to call the project people at the district level first. If you do call me, I'm going to get the district staff involved and make sure that everybody's on the same page about that specific item or issue. And I think with that, if anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
This is Rezi from Public Works Department. I don't have any question, but I really like to have a copy of this presentation. There is a lot of useful information on these, both of these presentations. Is it possible to email these for all of us, or how can we get a copy of this presentation?
Allie, you want to address that?
Yeah, Brazi, that was actually a terrific prelude into the answer to that for everybody. So we're definitely going to be sharing the presentation from both Clifton and from John, and we will upload those onto our project call webpage. So I'm going to take us there real quick right now. Just because we don't have everybody's email address through any sort of registration for this workshop, I think this will be the best that everybody knows that you can come right here to our Alamo Area MPO.org/call for projects webpage. And right now, when you come here, it automatically defaults to this workshop tab. So this afternoon, we're going to replace the Join Here access buttons with the presentations and the contact information. So as John was saying, there'll be a TxDOT San Antonio District specific contact that he'd recommend, and that's actually going to be John Polito. So we're going to have John's contact information and Clifton's contact information up here with the two presentations and this recording in case anybody wanted to actually listen to it over again. And then later on, the Submittal View tab will have embedded in it the project submittal form that Clifton will be walking us through in a little bit. But I did want to show everybody this in case you didn't access, in case you accessed this meeting in a different way. this is where we're housing all of our resources.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Were there any other questions for John or Clifton? Okay, so what we had done last in the morning session was take a quick 5-minute break just so people could stretch and maybe grab a glass of water or something like that. So I think we'll do that again. I have 2:32 on my clock here. So why don't we come back at about 2:38 and then we'll have Clifton walk us through the project submittal form. Okay, I think it's been about 5 minutes. Clifton, are you ready to take us through?
Yes, I am.
Terrific. Okay, I'll let you take it away.
All right, thanks, Allie, and thanks to John again for being a part of the meeting and presenting on the local government program. It's really important, and we're really excited about, you know, selecting projects and programming them, but those are some really important details that will help a great partnership with TxDOT. So again, for the rest of the meeting, we'll mostly be talking about our call for project submittal form, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. So getting into the project submittal form, it is based on forms we've done in the past. You know, we're continuously improving this with each project call. So you'll see some familiarity, but we did have to make some updates because there is a, you know, 3 funding program project call instead of just a single funding program. And so with that in mind, this is just a splash page. So there's a link here that can take you back to the call for projects. And you'll note the submittal due date is April 1st, 2021. We had a question during the last call, and we wanted to make sure that y'all know that we're aiming to have the project submittal form posted on the website around mid-February. But as we were rolling it out, and we'll show you the full form today as it stands, but we wanted to give some time for some of our TAC folks to run through the form a few times and kind of test it out from an outside perspective before we made it live on the website. So that shouldn't take too terribly long, a few weeks at the most, and hopefully by, you know, mid-February we have it on the website. So that's when you can kind of expect that. So again, just a splash page, and pretty similar to the last form that, from what I recall. So page 2 for the project submittal form is just the contact information. So at first it will be your submitting agency, and then the contact person responsible for the project. There was a question last time about if there's multiple agencies, what do we do? I would just list, you know, every agency involved. So if there's 2 or 3 agencies partnered, I can't imagine more than 3, but 2 agencies partnered, just list them and kind of the order that they'll be contributing financially. And then the contact person should be somebody who is the main contact person for the project at one agency. So, and then their email and phone number. And then if that staff member did not attend the pre-submittal workshop, just list the person from your agency who was here to represent your agency at the workshop. And if multiple people did, your supervisor, something like that. So, and then the last question on this page is project delivery experience. So just a list of the CSJs or MPO project numbers that you've had programmed with the MPO that you've completed since the year 2016. We just want to get an idea of your project delivery experience and your experience using MPO funds to complete projects. So moving on to page 3, this is mostly information about the project itself. So your project or roadway name as it's found in a plan, or as you would like it listed in the tip, just to keep it specific and formal. And then the project type, as you can see, we have our 4 overall project types: added capacity, TSMO, operational, transit, and then bicycle pedestrian. And then other CMAQ. As I mentioned before, CMAQ is a pretty broad program. So if you do have a CMAQ project or program that doesn't fall within these 4 categories as well, you can click here. I'll select TSMO for now. And then is the project located in Bexar County? This is a screener question for CMAQ. So if you are wanting to seek CMAQ funding, it does have to be in Bexar County. So as you can see, this second question popped up when I clicked yes. And if you click that, the CMAQ funding will load in with the additional project questions. And I'll show you that later. And then if the project is in multiple counties or it's not in Bexar County, you can select whatever counties it's in under this checklist. And so, as I mentioned before, for all the agencies that, for all the projects that your agency is submitting for this call for projects, they need to be ranked by priority overall. And then, if applicable, if you're submitting for multiple categories, you're ranking for CMAQ, for example, like, you know, you have an SCBG project that's #1 overall, but then just write in here CMAQ 1 if you have a separate CMAQ project that isn't your number 1 overall priority, for example, and we'll be able to figure that out. And then your limits from to, just project limits, and then a brief description, so just a 250-character description there, and then a little bit longer text box to elaborate on the purpose and need of your project. And then transportation equity. So we have a few links you can click through here. This first link shows you USDOT's website on equity and its relationship to public health, and how important that is to us as we do metropolitan transportation planning. And then here is a map for San Antonio specific information. It's through our IMAP service. So you just click through, and then over here on the right-hand side, you'll see transportation equity data. And, you know, when we talk about transportation equity as a MPO, we're mainly talking about environmental justice, but also includes minority and low-income populations. So basically what we're looking for here is this is part of the bonus points that we're planning on offering. If your project has a positive impact, provides greater access to disadvantaged groups, whether that be environmental justice groups or you know, low-income groups, et cetera. Just explain here how you believe the project is providing more equitable access for that population. It doesn't have to be super technical. We don't want it to be super technical, but if that's something that you have planned as part of your purpose and need, or if it's something that you see meeting needs of those disadvantaged populations, then definitely describe that here in transportation equity, and it could give you some bonus points. Plan consistency. So if there's any local or regional plans that reference your project, go ahead and note those here in this text box. And then if your agency has an ADA accessibility transition plan, you'll just click yes, and then provide a link to that agency's publicly published transition plan. If not, we'll figure out if that's needed or anything based on your answer in your project. So moving on to page 4, this is just a mapping tool that Cecilia Martinez, our GIS manager, developed to kind of get a basic, consistent way to map out our projects that we'll be accepting for this project call. So just a quick tour. So if you want to like start your map out at a certain address, you can just enter an address. So I can enter 825 South St. Mary's Street, which is where the MPO is. So that's a good way to start out. And then you can zoom with your mouse wheel or with the buttons here, and then this will take you to the wider view again. And then it can ask you for your location in your web browser if you want to do it that way and start from there, just options. And then you can change the base map here to be something, you know, a little bit easier on the eyes, or, you know, more helpful for you, more detailed street information. But to make and then here you can create a full screen map. So you can put it in full screen mode to make it a little bit easier to use. But here's the tools that you will use to actually, this is the tool you'll use to actually place on the map your project. And it doesn't have to be precise. You know, we know it's not an engineering drawing or anything. So say I wanted to build a monorail between all of the quarries in San Antonio, I could just click here and then double click to end it. So you click and then click along the points of your project and then double click to end. And once you've drawn that line, you can use the pencil here and move the points around, move the project itself. It's pretty intuitive, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect, and then that deletes any drawings you made. So again, it's just a way to get a consistent map for all of our project submittals, and if anything needs to be changed, we can edit those ourselves in coordination with you in GIS. So, but that was a cool tool that we were really excited about that Cecilia put together. So moving on to number 5, this is your project specific questions, so based on the project type. So here you can see our TISMO additional questions loaded in, and I'll cover these more. I had slides in the presentation to cover these, so we'll cover all the project types later. But I wanted to show you the emissions reduction information specifically, and this is for CMAQ. So remember at the beginning, I clicked on we were in Bexar County and we want to seek CMAQ funding, and once you do that, your project type questions will load in here, and then the CMAQ questions will load in here. So if you have an SDBG project that isn't CMAQ eligible, just these questions will pop up if it's TISMO. And then if you're just doing CMAQ, these questions won't pop up, but the emissions reductions will. So something we're really excited about this year is using a Texas Transportation Institute tool for air quality reduction, and it's called MOSERS. And what's cool about this tool is that it has coding in it specifically for the major metropolitan areas in Texas, including San Antonio's area. And so instead of using like a FHWA's calculator, which is great, it's, it's coded to be like nationwide averages. And so we have like San Antonio specific air quality data programmed into MOSERS that makes it more accurate for our region. And so it just kind of sharpens the knife a little bit on the applicability of those air quality measures and how we can use them to select projects. And so, again, if a particular strategy isn't available in MOSERS, please submit the emissions reduction as pending. Alternatively, as I mentioned before, we can use FHWA's tools or your own estimates if they make sense and are kosher and everything. So, but kind of moving on, here you'll select your CMAQ project type. And we'll just say transit bus retrofits. So if you click through this link, it'll open the MOSERS page, and it opens to the MOSERS tool, which is the main thing you'll be using. So if you click on this link, it'll bring up this pop-up, and this is the Excel spreadsheet you'll download. So there it goes. And you can see here that you have access to the MOSERS guidebook, the overview of the program, and as well as strategies and some more archived documentation. So any questions you have will probably be able to be answered there as far as the technical information. And so it is an Excel-based spreadsheet, and it uses macros, so you have to enable editing and then enable the macro content, which is safe. And once that loads up, okay, and welcome to MOSERS. Thank you. So we'll look at, we don't have retrofit, we'll use traffic signalization. And so once you pull that up, it will bring up these fields, and this is the data that you'll actually enter, these values here. And then you have a selection of variables normally. So you'll be able to select these values. Oh, you can't select a variable because that doesn't make any sense. But yeah, you'll select San Antonio and then go through and select your different values based on the area type, facility type, cycle length of the corridor. So, and then this is data that's auto-populated by the spreadsheet. And here are the calculations that it will output for the base end. So it will calculate some data and then some more output data. And I think you'll click here to load emission factors. Okay, so we can go a little bit deeper. So we'll say 2025 and road type. Say it's an arterial. Great. And then you can load your emissions factors here. Yes. And it will access the website and download it for you. All right. And so if you did populate the actual values you need, it would populate all these based on those, and then you would have your daily emissions reductions here, and we'll be using pounds per day to protect the imperial measurement system as we know it. So yeah, but that's what we'll take. That's what we'll take. These two, NOx and VOC and pounds per day, are the outputs you're looking for. So once you have those, you will go back to your project submittal form and put that in for NOx and VOC. So yeah, that's CMAQ in a nutshell. And then you'll want to hang on to this documentation. So let me show you that. So if you want to view the report as it will be submitted as you're working on it and see how complete it is and what it looks like and everything, you can click that button. It says view report, and it will give you an output of all the information. And then if you do the same thing, you can save that report as a PDF. So be sure to do that and submit that with your supporting documentation. And we'd like for you to put this project information in here. So your matching project title and number and the location, and then, just your brief description here and the county as well right here. So not required. I don't think we need that necessarily, but then clicking here will open back up that strategy documentation for that specific strategy. So instead of looking through the Texas Air Quality Portal website, you can just click on here and it'll open up the technical documentation for you, which is really neat, really easy to use. So yeah, once you save that PDF and input your pounds per day in these two forms, then you can click next. And your project development milestones are basically just the completion percentages for preliminary engineering, public involvement, environmental, right-of-way, utilities, financial requirements, and coordination and agreements with TxDOT and other agencies. So it's kind of typical engineering enumeration here, I guess, 25, 50, 75, 90, and complete. So just an estimate of the completion rate as you submit the project. And finally, next to last, I guess, there's a lot of forms coming up, but next to last is our construction costs. So here you'll just enter your total project construction or activity cost estimate. So we'll say 20 million. And your overmatch contribution. So this number isn't your local match. It's the dollar amount over 20% of this number. So if you had 500,000 extra dollars over match, you would put that here. So what we do is the form auto subtracts that $500 from your construction activity cost total, and then it splits up that that actual programmed amount up into the federal amount that's covered, and then your required 20% local match. So this $500,000 would go towards your bonus points. If it was over 10, if it was, yeah, it'd go towards bonus points. And then if you have another agency or organization that is contributing the overmatch besides the principal organization, you would put that here for our records. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, project supporting documents. So here we need a project location map with adjacent land use. This is what I showed you earlier. We just wanted that to have a consistent, mapping product that we would have with each of our submittals. So with this, you can provide any supplementary maps and then that required adjacent land use map for our records, a detailed cost estimate of your project, typical cross sections, if applicable. This is where you would put that exported file from Mosers to CMAQ emissions analysis, or, the FHWA equivalent would go here too if you were using that. The signed project understanding form, which will be on the website. The implementing agency's resolution of support for the project and commitment of local match. So again, that's a required thing with submittal. And then additional resolutions or letters of support from implementing partner agencies. Any of those would go here as well. So once you have the form done and all of these appropriate forms uploaded, you'll hit submit and we'll receive it. And if you need to start another project, you can click here. Once you hit that submit button, we have it set up. Cecilia was able to work it out to where you will receive a confirmation email from an Alamo Area MPO web address. I think it's your email address. I think it's a Gmail address, but they'll say Alamo Area MPO at gmail.com, I believe. So it should look familiar. You can submit another form here. And as we were talking after the last workshop, Cecilia thinks it would be possible to program a kind of a save feature in here. So if you wanted to save, if you weren't able to complete the project submittal form in one sitting, you would be able to save it for later. So we're working on that capability. And if that's not available, you should be able to just work through and gather up all the documents and answers. Hopefully it's not onerous enough that you'll be able to do that. So, but we're kind of working on building in that functionality within the next few weeks. So hopefully that's available for when we kick off. So, all right. So that is all I have for the project submittal form demo. Is there anything I maybe missed, or does anybody have any questions? All right.
Good job of that run through, Clifton. And this is Allie again. just want to reiterate, we're open to taking your questions. If you think of something afterward, you can obviously reach out to Clifton and any of us here at the MPO, but Clifton is our main point of C on this effort and point of contact, sorry, on this effort. We're here to help. We don't ever want to make you feel like we're trying to get you in any way with the form or the questions that we're asking. So if there's something that happens after submission of the form and Clifton has a question reviewing the data, he'll be reaching out to you. So we are here to make the process flow as seamlessly as possible for you.
Yeah, no, we don't want the form to be like a black box. We want to interact with you all as much as possible through the process, or as much as needed, I guess, because we know that there's some complexities with these projects, and you might have all the questions, or maybe your agency hasn't delivered a project before through the MPO, and we'll have to provide all the help that we need to get those projects submitted and get them programmed. So, but yeah, like Ali said, we're here and we're available and as much as possible. So. All right. So I have more to present. I just remembered.
You do have more to present?
That's right. Yeah. I'm going to go over we went over the call for projects form, but I'll go over the project type specific questions, like I said I would.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So on that I think it was the fifth page, where I was showing you where the project specific questions would pop up. These are those. So I just wanted to walk through those specifically. So for the capacity project specific questions, we're asking for you to describe current issues impacting safety, current issues impacting operation, and then describing any bicycle or pedestrian components that are part of the project. I know for TxDOT on-system projects, complementary bicycle and pedestrian projects or components are required in those, but if it's not on TxDOT or whatever, we just want to make sure that we capture any of those complementary projects for our MPO planning purposes. And then lastly, describe any unique traffic scenarios affecting this project location. And then for TISMO, kind of similar, describe current issues impacting safety, current issues impacting operation, and unique traffic scenarios. Pretty similar. For transit, the information is quite a bit different. We tried to really use a data-driven approach for roadway, but we don't have as much data in the MPO for transit. And so we're asking more specific questions, more data-intensive questions for transit, I suppose. But those are current and projected ridership, and current being 2019 and projected for 2025. And then also current and projected reliability, service capacity, frequent access, access to frequent transit service, and then how this project improves system connectivity, project justification related to reliability, ridership, or service capacity, and then how this project addresses access for EJ population. So like we were talking about, EJ or equity access is a project or a scoring component within the 1,000 point regular scoring range. And so for bike ped and transit, it's part of the 1,000 points as well as bonus points. But then for capacity and operational projects, those are just bonus points. So it's kind of asked a little differently, but that's a requirement for transit and bike ped projects. So again, the project specific questions for bike ped project types are to describe current issues impacting safety, list any crash modification factors the project proposes. And just a quick word on crash modification factors. Those are just design elements that are meant to reduce the number of accidents. So those do have to be documented formally. We use it's called the CMF Clearinghouse. So that's Crash Modification Factor Clearinghouse. It's a U.S. government-run website, and it just tracks all the studies that are done on crash modification factors and kind of rates them. But if you have a design element in there, just let us know what that is, if it's meant to be a safety improvement, and we'll help you track that down and link it up so we can score it. So that'll be on us. We just want to know what the design factor is in there that could possibly reduce crashes. That's all we need in that box. So, and if you have any questions on that, of course, just contact me. So moving on, the last two questions, describe how the project improves access for adjacent communities to destinations. So how does it help the general population access the bicycle pedestrian network? And then lastly, how does this project address access specifically for low-income and minority populations? Very similar to the transit question. So. And finally, CMAQ questions. As I mentioned, if you do select one of the 4 project types besides other, you can also apply for CMAQ funding. You just need to click the boxes as I demonstrated and enter in the data. But as we went over, you select your project type and then just enter in your NOx and VOC in pounds per day for whatever is outputted by Mosers or FHWA's tools. And that's the end of my presentation. So we'll have plenty of time for questions, I think, today. And of course, if any come up, you can just ask us via email or phone. But are there any questions right now that anybody has regarding the MPO, the project call, the form, or any questions for TxDOT on project delivery or local government stuff?
Yeah, this is Michael Shango calling on behalf of the city of Selma. I got a question about the $1 million minimum for the project. So that applies to all categories. So whether you're doing, you know, a mixed-use path or redoing a road and reassigning lanes and adding sidewalk, each project has to have, it's $1 million construction cost minimum.
Yeah, that's a good question. That rule is a little bit more lax for bicycle and pedestrian projects. And then I think it mentioned in the slides, I don't know if I mentioned it specifically, but if it's a program that doesn't have a minimum requirement, it's just for construction projects. So even though, you know, there's that $1 million limit for construction projects, but for bike and pedestrian facilities, I think we can be a little lax. So we don't want to, especially for those project types, we don't want to discourage anybody from submitting a project. But that is kind of, that $1 million is definitely in place for roadway facilities, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
Hey, all, this is Janie. That $1 million is there because that's always worked as a good project cost threshold. If a project is too much less than that, typically it's not worth federalizing. You can do it cheaper, faster with local money or something than with federal money. So that's the reason for that $1 million threshold, is to make sure that the project is worth federalizing. Because you're gonna, if you haven't done this before, you're gonna find that there's a lot of bells, hoops, whistles that go along with federal money, and just be sure you want to get into that with a project.
All right, thanks for the question, Michael, and thanks for clarifying more, Jeannie. I appreciate it. Is there any other questions at this time?
Just one more thing, like we did this morning, if the participants could just type their name in the chat box and what agency they're with, that would be really great for us for record keeping.
Thanks, David. Thanks, Scott. Well, this is Allie again. I think that at this point we can close the presentation, but Clifton, myself will stay on in case anybody has any lingering questions that pop up and you want to ask kind of here at the end. And as soon as we can, we'll update our webpage with these presentations so that resources will be available Jeannie has been sending some updates out through her list of, I think, mostly TAC members and previous implementing agency partners. So if you've received some information through Jeannie in that way, we'll also send an update when those resources are online. That just know that you can continue to check that Call for Projects webpage for up-to-date information.